All right, we are live. Welcome back, everybody, to the Other Life podcast. Thanks for coming out, as always. I'm excited for today's talk. I'm talking with Brett Goldstein. We're going to talk about his newsletter, which is a social science themed newsletter. And the reason I'm really interested in Brett's project and why I think my audience will be especially interested in Brett's project is because his newsletter is very much in the mold of what I call the indie thinker model, in that he's really leveraging relatively disinterested, relatively academic research and knowledge to nonetheless make an interesting play for a kind of financially sustainable internet creative project. So I know people that listen to my podcast are very interested in this kind of stuff. Everyone knows I'm super interested in this stuff at the moment. And yeah, I think Brett's a smart dude with an interesting model that would be of interest to not only myself, but many people in my audience. So that's why I had him on. Brett, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, totally. I'm excited to kind of pick apart your project and learn a little bit more about the model that you're building, how you think about your creative and intellectual work as a business model. So if you don't mind, maybe for my audience, if we could just start by, why don't you just tell us, what is your newsletter, socialstudies.news? What's the elevator pitch?
Social Studies is basically a newsletter that is at the intersection of technology and the social sciences. So really there are two or three parts. First part is I round up all the most interesting news that happened on tech Twitter. So I take all of the most interesting discussions and tweets that happened in the past week, summarize them for you every week, and throw in a few of my own thoughts. On top of that, I also will do deep dive analysis on these kind of tech news topics, or even longer term tech topics. Such things as like, how platform shifts work, and then relate concepts from the social sciences, psychology, philosophy, economics, linguistics, and relate them to those topics, and come up with some interesting stuff to say.
Right on. Okay, cool. And who do you see as your ideal reader? Who are you really trying to reach and to help with your newsletter?
Truthfully, it's really everybody in the tech industry, because I believe the social sciences are the most important discipline, even beyond the technical disciplines, for building for humans, and we're all building for humans. But probably more specifically, it's the social science majors who find themselves perhaps a little bit lost and confused in the tech industry, which verbalizes that STEM majors are basically the only important major in the industry, and that caring a lot about Immanuel Kant or cognitive linguistic theories is a waste of time. And so my message is to them. And very interestingly, had this newsletter been out 2 decades ago or something like that, my audience probably would have been Paul Graham and Peter Thiel, because these are actually individuals who care a lot about the social sciences. If you read a lot of their work, Peter Thiel, Competition is for Losers, that's game theory. A lot of Paul Graham's writings, a lot of Naval, Balaji, all of these incredible technologists are really social scientists deep down, but will rarely verbalize it. So they're my audience too.
Okay, so that's kind of interesting to be aiming for quite different types of people, right? Is that hard? I mean, to present ideas in a way that is ideally useful for undergraduates who maybe are not that sophisticated, and also appeal to far more sophisticated, more mature individuals?
Yeah, I would say so. So, I mean, when I'm presenting these concepts from psychology or linguistics or something, I'm obviously presenting them in a very rudimentary sense. The benefit, though, is that nobody's really doing this right now. So the people who are linguistics, experts and PhDs and whoever, they haven't seen these concepts related to technology in the way that I'm putting them together. So despite the fact that they know all about conceptual metaphor theory, they haven't seen that connected to alternative meats. Right.
Right. Okay. It makes sense. Now, it's always hard now it is a paid newsletter, right? There's a free tier and a paid tier. Is that right?
No, it's all free. 100%.
Oh, it is all free. Okay. I wasn't sure. Great. So let's pick that apart. So was that, presumably that was a conscious strategic decision. There's a huge explosion of paid newsletters. So why did you decide to keep it all free?
Several reasons. I think the simplest reason is that I'm still early on. and only about probably like 2,500 subs right now.
Okay.
Been growing pretty fast, but especially since actually some context is the newsletter used to be entirely focused on news from tech Twitter. And then probably 2-3 months ago, I pivoted it to also include the social sciences. And that was because of a personal thing, because it's my passion area. It's what matters most to me. And I don't want to be a news junkie my whole life. At the same time, nobody else was covering tech Twitter news like I was. So I felt like that was an important piece to continue. But again, still early on. And I guess one of the most important considerations when you're turning your newsletter into a paid newsletter is that you're blocking some content behind a paywall, right? And you're also committing to doing a certain number of pieces every single week. I'm averaging about 2 a week, but I think I'm still oriented around growth, and so I don't want to block anything right now. I think
that's totally the right move. I mean, I've talked about this a little bit also. I think people are like way too gung-ho about trying to build a paid newsletter. And so I think that's really smart. I mean, I also, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is because I also completely agree with your hunch or your hypothesis that social science is way more valuable than people realize. And it's a whole wealth of knowledge that is much more practical and valuable than people realize. And it's being significantly underexploited. Like, you're right, there are not that many people out there distributing serious social scientific knowledge for these different use cases. So I think I really like your hunch. In other words, I agree with you, and I'm bullish on the larger idea that underwrites this project. So it's exciting to catch you early on. It's exciting to learn more about your project and how you see things at this relatively early stage. Because a lot of podcasts, it's all about, like, people always want to get the famous people, the people who have like huge numbers, the people who are like making millions of dollars. But I'm actually often more interested in people like you at a stage such as the one you're at with your newsletter. I want to learn about people early on and like how you're making these decisions live in a way. So you decided to keep it free. You decided to keep an open schedule. So you did not pre-commit to a certain release schedule, if I'm understanding correctly. Is that right?
I kind of do. So obviously one part of my newsletter is roundups of what happened on tech Twitter every week. So I roughly commit to doing that every single week. I've missed maybe like 3 or 4 weeks over the course of a year, or delayed them for one reason or another. I'm not super militant, because I think a lot of newsletter writers will say your audience expects your newsletter on a certain time cadence, and I think that's true if you have a massive audience, but nobody's going to unsubscribe from you if you are late by a few days, especially if it's high quality. And then obviously if I'm spending that amount of time doing the tech Twitter roundups, I need to also spend time doing the social studies stuff, doing the social studies analysis. So those pieces take a lot longer. They're usually more well researched, and those are my babies. So it's like it's hard to churn them out all the time. But having a weekly cadence with those is what I've been shooting for.
I get it. So you aim for the tech Twitter roundups to be consistently weekly, but then the other ones are, you allow yourself to do that at whatever pace you can.
Yeah, but I try to do them. I try to do them weekly, and they definitely do. There are cadences where it definitely happens weekly, but it's not always the case.
Right on. Well, I think, it's often smart to not overpromise or overcommit. Like, I'm absolutely going to have X, Y, and Z X amount of times each week. I think to leave yourself a little bit of wiggle room there is smart. Yeah. So you have about 2,500 subscribers, you said, and how long ago did you start it?
So again, the tech Twitter TLDR was about a year ago. That was just the Twitter newsletter, which I have some thoughts about what types of newsletters grow faster than others.
Please do. Please share.
Yeah. So the long story short is that weekly news and link roundups just are not shared very much, right? It's particularly like the number of different stories in a single newsletter is probably inversely correlated to how shareable that piece of content is.
So shorter the better for sharing, you think?
No. The number of different stories. So the more focused your story is, the easier it is, more likely it is for somebody to share. So typically with a news roundup, you're basically saying, here's 20 things that happened this week. Where's 10 things that happened this week?
Right.
And so that's less of a shareable moment than something like, hey, here's this Italian art form called Sprezzatura, and like it shapes everything in the world. Cool. That is one thing you can get excited about. That's one thing I can share with lots of people. There's also a number of, I think, proven models for what type of newsletter content is shared regularly. And weekly news roundups is not that.
Yeah, that sounds really smart. That sounds totally right. Actually, do you have offhand the other learnings from that research? Yeah. Like what other templates are more or less likely to be shared?
Yeah. So there's this concept called what is it? Basically, what's happening right now is that we're seeing kind of the Wikipediafication of newsletters, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think the most shared newsletters are ones that are similar to Wikipedia pages. They're exhaustive, deeply researched, often collaboratively researched information about one specific topic. So one of my favorite recent examples of this is Packy McCormick. He writes a newsletter called Not Boring. He started his newsletter, and the general idea was, let's talk about general business stuff, but like integrate pop culture in a really fun and interesting way. Cool. That he did really, really well. He did exceptionally well. And he really, really started taking off when he started pivoting his newsletter to be entirely company deep dives. So now he's doing this. There's Turner Novak is doing this. Several other writers are doing this, where they're doing company deep dives, where they're basically going and showing the entire company history, all of the product offerings of a certain company, the bear case, the bull case, why it's a great investment, what's a bad investment. And so anybody who is a retail investor, who is their audience probably, can look at that and say, cool, now I can make my investment decision on this really well-known stock, this really well-known equity based on this. So those things tend to get shared a ton. They also get shared internally at those companies that they're written about. So that's just one example. Dave Perel has a more abstract theory where he says, basically make your one essay the place to go for one piece of content, one piece of information, right? Mm-hmm. Peter Thiel's religion. That's everything I need to know about how Peter Thiel thinks. That's the only thing I need to read, right?
Right. That's kind of like an old school like SEO idea too, that you want to make this kind of like one-stop shop on a topic. You want to be like the single article that completely dominates other articles purporting to explain some particular thing. Yep. So yeah, that's a really good insight, and it definitely squares with what I observe also in the kind of newsletter game. So I think that's right. So when you started, I guess that's why you started doing more focused essays in your newsletter to better aim for that type of content model. And did you notice more growth with those, more shares and more growth with those?
Totally. And for me, it's particularly about the message that I'm saying. So nobody wakes up in the morning and is like, I wonder how conceptual metaphor theory from George Lakoff relates to technology platform shifts. Nobody's like, oh God, like, thank God somebody put this together so now I can understand this. Literally nobody thinks that. And so I'm not going to say, that means my content is less shareable, because it is very shareable. That essay did very, very well. But it's not as cut and paste in black and white. I don't have a clear algorithm that I can go by. Actually, I kind of do, but like, I don't have as easy an algorithm where I can say what's the next company on my list. I do go and look at like, okay, what are interesting, phenomenon or studies from psychology or philosophy or something like that. What would Nietzsche say about like user experience design, right? Like, these are very interesting questions. But again, nobody's waking up in the morning thinking about these.
Right.
But yeah, I think the other important thing about my newsletter is that this is something I think a lot of people under discuss, is like, how optimized do you want to be? So once you're in a game for long enough, you're going to understand the rules of the game. You're going to see who's winning and who's losing, and you're going to understand what makes a winner and what makes a loser, right? And so the question that most people should ask themselves, everybody strives to be winners, right? Everybody wants to be these massive breakout successes, but often going towards that winning route, trying to become a winner, deviates a little bit from who you are as a person or what your interests are, right?
Totally.
On a given day or week or time period. And it's not that, it's the best position to be in where your identity is aligned to a winning growth identity, but that's not always the case. And so I feel friction very often where I want to write about something and I'm just going to write about it, but I know for a fact another topic that I could write about or a way I could write about it would cause much more viral growth than the way I choose to write about it.
Right, for sure. Yeah, but you're content with that.
I'm content because I'm making the explicit decision. Like I'm aware of these decisions.
Yeah, I completely know exactly what you're talking about, and I also completely agree with you that I think it's a good move. I think it's a good move to basically sacrifice a little bit of market optimization in the interest of doing like exactly what it is you want to do in your own unique, weird style. And I think your instinct is also right that gets you a lot of secret advantages. Like it's going to be easier to last long. You're going to have better longevity, and you're probably also going to enjoy it more, which is probably going to lead you to bring a uniquely, superior kind of a spunk to the game when you sit down to work every day, and you're doing something a little weird, a little bit off like the market optimal, and you could tweak it a little bit and make much more money and have much more growth. But you're like, no, I'm going to do it this weird little way that I like it better this way. I think it makes it a little bit more. It makes the game a little bit more fun. I think, in a weird way, it also because I'm basically, if you can't tell, I think about my own stuff in a very similar way. Like a lot of my stuff has kind of weird branding and is a lot of, and I often see like an easy little pivot where I could just make it like a more traditional like business, like and I'm like, nah, I don't know. To me, the way that I think about it is like, it also gives you this cool little psychological kind of, I don't know. It's like, it's hard to describe it, but I'll put it this way. When you allow yourself this kind of like suboptimal model that of course has to be like optimal enough to last and to survive and to grow. It has to be, sufficiently viable, right? But you're leaving a little bit of optimization on the table, even like a good chunk of optimization on the table. When you go to work every day, you're kind of like, you don't fault yourself as much for maybe not like totally killing it in terms of results. Because you're kind of like, yeah, well, I'm doing something a little weird. Of course, it's not going to be huge. And in a way, it can be kind of relaxing. It can be kind of like you feel, I don't know, kind of protected and off in your own little world. And I very much like that. I think there are real like creative and intellectual advantages to that, to carving out that type of niche.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think I will play devil's advocate here because I think I like doing this with my red team. My friend says your ideas. There's a story about this amazing musician. He goes by Ricky Reed right now, but his real name is Eric Frederick. I used to go see him in high school, and he played in this really obscure progressive rock band, just like really hard to listen to for a lot of people. Weird time signatures, weird key changes, all that stuff. And his whole thing was, he's like, I want to make art. I want to progress the music industry. I want to do something interesting. I don't want to be like everybody else. And after a period of time, he got fed up with it, with not having the exposure of the platform. And he started making satirical pop music, like very satirical, over the top. He changed his name to Ricky Reed. He started pretending he was one of these shitty like record producers and stuff. And then he got picked up. Now he's the guy who produces Jason Derulo. He's worked with The Weeknd. He signed Lizzo to his record label, and he's the guy behind Lizzo. Like, and now he's actually, he did the Trojan horse model. Now he's changing music from the inside. And so, there's a world where, it's, I haven't reached a conclusion on this. Like, is it better to actually just hyper optimize and then do whatever the heck you want after you have optimized and you're winning? Or is it, be true to yourself so that you can like feel happy in the day to day?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's probably different for different personalities. But I mean, the way that I think about it personally is I think it's cool to basically have a pretty standard viable business model in mind. So like you build something where it's like, this is tried and true. There's lots of people doing something very similar and making a ton of money. It's clear that this type of project can work, and I have an understanding of how to do it, and I'm going to put in the work to do it. But instead of making every little decision geared towards optimizing for a profit or whatever it might be willing to like look at that model and be like, okay, here's one thing that I'm just going to be super unique on because I like it, because it makes sense to me, because that reflects like what I believe in. And maybe it's not even clear. Maybe I can't really brand it effectively yet. Maybe I can't really communicate the value proposition yet, but it's like something that I'm obsessed with it. I see it and I want to make that my unique little twist, whether or not it's optimal or not, so that's kind of how I think about it, is like, you want growth, you need growth, you need profit, you need to see success, and it needs to be real. But you can afford to sacrifice a little bit of that optimization in order to make something like unique and special to you that really like gets your blood pumping and really like makes you want to hustle really hard on it because it makes you believe in it more. Like to me, this is like the indie thinker model. Like I don't know exactly what that is yet. It's like a vision, right? It's like something I see. I know that it's there, and I know it's not being catered to. I know that it doesn't have the kind of public consciousness that it should have, and there's still so much to be figured out about it. But it's really like a wager. It's like I'm definitely leaving money on the table by like trying to pursue a vision that is weird and not yet articulated. And but I wouldn't have it any other way. Like if I tried to just do like a normal podcast business or a normal like newsletter business, and my goal was just to make money with something that was like highly reliable to make a lot of money, I could definitely conceive of it, and I could probably get pretty far in it. But to me, like that would just suck. Like I'm not that type of person. I don't have it in me to do that kind of like optimized business play. So that's what I'm hearing from what you're putting down.
Yeah. One thing I'll add here is that I guess one of like the theses of my newsletter and just me in general is that the world and everything operates on fractals, and that, you can study any level of a system and it'll be kind of rhyming and synonymous with every other level. And so I think individuals and societies are more or less optimized than others. So just in the way that like a newsletter could be better, written to optimize the algorithm to like, get the most shares, the same way you compare an investment banker and an artist or an academic. Like these are two different people. These are people who are optimizing for entirely different things. The artist is not optimizing for the money, right? And the investment banker is optimizing for the money potentially, right? Mm-hmm. And so like, it's like, artists, you could argue that artists in a sense are disoptimized in the same way that like picking an obscure newsletter topic that is not business related, that is not like, cut and dry finance related, that you can monetize for tons of money, is disoptimized.
Right. Exactly. So like one of my big talking points on the indie thinker model is that you can pursue something kind of radically disinterested. You can have a kind of philosophical or a scientific or an artistic vision that you're passionate about and that you want to work on, and you can put most of your time into that disinterested, focused, relatively abstract research and work that doesn't necessarily have any immediate value to anyone that they would be willing to pay for, at least not obviously so, at least not on the surface. But you can build systems on the internet that are such that you can fund that work through kind of auxiliary mechanisms, whether it be like books or courses or whatever, like there are, or paid newsletters or whatever the case might be, that you can take a kind of relatively disinterested, seemingly unprofitable thing, but then build kind of more traditional profit-based apparatuses and just frame them in a certain way. That's kind of what I generally tell people, is like, it's often just a matter, a slight difference of framing can take like a totally disinterested, seemingly useless pursuit and field of knowledge, and just a slight little framing can make it into a number of perfectly profitable and viable operations. So I'm curious, like from your perspective, are there any particularly interesting kind of low-hanging fruit in social science literatures that you're aware of that you think speak to creators in particular? I'm curious.
Like, what do you mean in terms of?
Oh, well, I mean, I would say for content creators in particular, as opposed to founders, like, do you think that there are unique kind of psychological learnings or psychological findings, or across the social sciences?
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, are there particular findings that you think are especially useful for content creators relative to maybe the other people that you speak to, such as founders in the more traditional sense?
Yeah, I will share my favorite word right now slash thing I'm exploring for a newsletter that just really excited about. The word is Sprezzatura. It's an Italian it's an Italian art form, I guess. And the art form, or I guess it means to come off like you're not trying very hard, right? And so if you think about like a lot of like achievement or effort on a bell curve, you really want to be in the 70th or 80th percentile. You don't want to seem like you're trying too hard, but you also don't want to try less hard than other people. So this applies to basically everything in life, literally everything. So there's an expression, I woke up like this, right? I woke up like this means I didn't try when I woke up. I still look beautiful, like my hair is like whatever, right? Like that's the message that is trying to say. Yeah, you see this on Twitter when people write threads. They say a quick thread. Well, you know, they spend hours and hours researching that thread.
Yeah.
It is not a quick thread. They didn't just blast
So
it out
true. Yeah.
while walking around. But why did they say a quick thread? They're saying it's a quick thread to make it seem like they didn't try that hard. At Stanford, there's this saying, the paddling duck syndrome. So I didn't go to Stanford. I dated a girl from Stanford, but this is the saying around campus. Paddling duck is like, if you look above the water, the duck doesn't seem like it's moving. It's like it's not trying very hard, right? Very calm, very stoic. You look below the surface, and it's just paddling its brains out, right? Sprezzatura. It's trying to come off like it's not trying that hard. And so what I found from my own explorations and experiments in content creation and everything, all the way down to the aesthetic you choose for your newsletter, for whatever you're going to do, making it come off a little bit like you didn't put a lot of effort into it is actually a good thing. It's really important. Making it look like you tried really, really hard on something doesn't always work out. And the way that I would actually quantify this is that it's like the bar of expectation. So when you get a piece of content and it looks like there wasn't a lot of effort into it, expectation is low. Okay, this is some grainy video, and like, who the heck are these two guys? Like, whatever, they don't seem like they're anybody special. So the bar is low. And then when you blow it out of the water, which is much easier when the bar is low, you end up getting a lot more, higher dopamine hits for your audience or whoever you're appealing to, compared to the other way, where if I posted a full-blown, like, beautifully created PDF document onto Twitter instead of a tweet storm, instead of just a quick tweet storm, people are going to be like, oh, this is beautiful. This must have a lot of information in it. And they get it. And they're like, well, there's a good amount of information, but it's not that much, So it's even if it's a little bit better, it's still not as much better as it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, that's a nice insight. I think I buy that. And it usefully pushes back against something that I think you find in the psychology of a lot of content creators, especially if you're being paid in one way or another for content, like whether it's through patrons or directly. I think there's a mentality often of like, oh, people are paying me for this. I have to show them that it was a lot of work, right? I have to show them I put a lot of hours into this to really make them feel like, their money is worth it. And what you're saying, it kind of very much goes against the grain of that's actually like the beta move. You want to actually deliver a lot of value and make it look like you did it just rolling out of bed.
Yeah, totally. I think it's like, you always meet these people who, like, you're in the elevator with them and they just like, talk your head off about some really deep, technical, amazing stuff. And you're like, are you Wikipedia? Are you an encyclopedia? Like, that's amazing. Whereas if somebody's like, oh, I've been studying, they're reading out of a book or something.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really good. So, okay. Interesting. And do you do anything in particular to grow your newsletter? Like, do you have particular growth hacks or anything like that? Like, what's your kind of routine after you publish a newsletter Do you have a kind of checklist of like, do you share it to different places? Do you send it to people? Any what does your workflow look like in that regard?
Yeah, I'd say the main growth things that I'm actively doing, or the things that help my growth, I guess, are definitely posting to Hacker News. I got on the front page once for an essay I wrote called "The Unbundling of Harvard Has Begun." I think just people like, probably psychologically, people like seeing big brands, like, big elitist brands get torn down like that.
Yeah.
And so something similar happened when I said, like, the end of Stanford in the venture capital industry is coming. Same vibe.
Yeah.
And I think generally having like more grandiose, interesting titles helps a lot, even if you're not saying anything that deep within it.
Yeah.
I guess like I'm a little bit like of a mercenary in this sense, where like I don't care so much about the title. Like I do a TLDR at the beginning. I don't think a lot of people do this yet, but I think people really should, because
I've started doing that too. Yeah. It's so important that the stuff at the top is way more important than everything else.
Yeah, you should expect very few people will actually read your newsletter, right? And actually, I think it's kind of, again, arrogant thing to believe that, oh, everybody, all these like thousands of people who open my newsletter, they're reading every word and they care about everything I say. No, like they get 15 newsletters a day. Like you're one of many of them, and you're still competing, even if you think that like you're in their inbox and like you're all theirs or they're all yours. Like you're still competing, so you still need to. You're grabbing attention at every level. So first level, the title. Second level, the photo in the top, the image at the top. Next level, the TLDR. Third level, the titles. I think making the newsletters more visually appealing helps a lot. I just in terms of feedback that I've gotten, I think there's this whole thing happening, and this is again Sprezzatura, where I think academics and maybe not academics, but people who want to come off as very intellectually elite will write giant blocks of text to make it seem like, oh, I didn't try very hard, or like I'm such a thinker or something like that. And they won't simplify. They won't say very simple sentences or something like that. So I think that's important. Other growth hacks, like really one of the simplest things is featuring other people's ideas. This is one of the main thing. I mean, podcasts are great for this, because you could basically go find somebody, work with them for an hour, and then they're so grateful and they want to share the podcast out, and that really helps. So Harry Stebbins is famous for basically building his career on this whole growth hack, which is find smart, successful people, work with them one-on-one to create some piece of content and have them share it out afterwards.
What was the name you said? How do you spell that? Or say it again?
Harry Stebbins, he runs 20-Minute VC. In the early days, he basically he found like no-name founders of like really small startups. He would interview them about their startup, and then he'd go down the cap table, ping all the VCs who obviously all had 10, 20, 50, 100,000 followers on Twitter, said, hey, I just talked about your portfolio company. Of course they want to share that, so they're going to share it. So I talked to Andrew Chen about this not too long ago, and he was basically saying, you got to look for these retweetable moments. I was exploring, I was doing a little bit of like soft research on like kind of the psychology of the retweet. Like what actually gets somebody to share a piece of content on Twitter, like a reshares a piece of content. And it's a lot more complicated than you think, I'd say.
Okay. Do you want to give us the TLDR?
Yeah, the TLDR is that, so I had this, I guess the story behind it is that I'm writing these profiles, these deep profiles of like, oh, this person's great, this person's great. Obviously, one of the reasons for retweeting or resharing something about you, if you wrote about me or something like that, is the proof of work. The effort that you put in makes me feel compelled to share this, particularly because it benefits me. I actually find most often that people are more comfortable sharing something that's 1 degree separated from them, but still relevant to them, like their idea or their startup they invested in, or a space that they're an expert in, something.
Right. They don't want to share something that's explicitly promoting them, because then it looks like they're promoting themselves.
Yes. So here's a fascinating thing. This actually, again, fractals. This phenomenon is everywhere. Agents in Hollywood exist to do negotiations on the behalf of the talent, not only because they're better at negotiations and that's their job, but they act as a layer in between, right? So we're talking about layers in between, not wanting to come off as arrogant, not wanting to come off as greedy or asking for money. Like actors don't want to seem like they're money grubbers, so they have agents going and asking for that money. Part of the reason we may hire lawyers is the same thing. Yeah.
Right.
And I think there's another parallel with these new products like SuperPeer or Cameo. It's actually really hard for people to price themselves and put themselves online because of this thing, because there's nothing in the center right now. SuperPeer is working on something, but the idea is that it's much easier to take money from somebody when you are not the one directly asking for the money.
Right. Yeah, in a weird way, I think the rise of Substack had a similar effect in that once it became trendy, then people felt comfortable like, oh, I'll start a Substack and ask for money because other people are doing it. And there's this intermediary called Substack, which is like normalizing this idea of asking for money for a newsletter. So because anyone could have built a newsletter and asked for money before Substack. Like the technology there were other ways to do it, right? But yeah, there's something about having that popular, recognized middleman that legitimates it and sanctions it for people.
Yeah, it's definitely zeitgeist. Like what should be free and what should be paid. I think the massive shift that I see happening right now is the move from a free open web or free pseudo open web, because you could argue Facebook and Instagram are not open, but they're public platforms. But the free open public web to siloed and paid communities, right? So we're going to pay for access to this Slack group. You're going to pay for access to this information in this Substack, right? And that's because people want identity. People are paying for community more than anything else. And I think this also goes back to Dunbar's number. Humans just weren't meant to associate with groups larger than 100 people. And this is why we have so many problems right now.
Yeah, I wonder what you think about this from a psychological perspective, because I have this theory that I think the reason why you're seeing so many paid communities, and I've experienced with this now, so this is somewhat an experiential observation, it's that on some level, it's like there's so many options on the free internet. Like there's so much free stuff, right? There's so many communities. It's so easy to find all kinds of people to talk to them. You can DM all kinds of people. You can make Facebook groups or join Facebook groups with all kinds of people. But there's this massive choice problem, right? And people, when they're inundated with choice, it's actually really quite stressful. It's impossible to choose which one of these different things to actually invest your time in. And so paying for something is basically just like a forcing function to constrict your own attention and force yourself to only do that one thing. And like, there's a critical perspective in which you could see this, you could critique that, right? And you could say, okay, well, that's a silly reason to like charge money for something. But when you actually start building online communities and you take it seriously and you try to really deliver value within a community, like I am with indiethinkers.org, you actually realize that the price is absolutely an essential aspect of it working for anyone involved. Because if people aren't paying for it, then they themselves can't find the time and energy to really care about it, to really contribute to it. And so I think you're absolutely right. And I would only add that I think the rise of paid communities, paid membership communities, it's actually kind of a response to information abundance and the proliferation of choices. It's like people want to and need to pay to constrict their choices. And in fact, it is worth it to do that. It's actually worth it. Yeah.
That's really, really interesting. The thing that I'll relate this to is religion. I think if you look at religion as a framework, it explains a lot of what's happening right now. So religion's great. Religion has ritual. Religion has you pay homage, and all of this. Religion is basically this highly evolved mechanism for creating deep bonds in a human community, right?
Totally.
And you look at the best. You look at the best communities, best online communities. They have all of these. right? They have people, and these are like universities. Like people pay a ton of money to go to these, these big universities. Even the bad universities, people pay tons of money to go to these things, and because they are, they're opting in this way, they feel obliged to kind of make the most of it and do what they can with it. So you're totally right on that front.
Yeah, that's right. So, do you want? I don't want to keep you for too long. Maybe we could talk a little bit about what you're up to right now, which is my understanding is that you are in Tulum, Mexico. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I recently participated in On Deck, which is a kind of an online community, Silicon Valley in the cloud, entrepreneur accelerator, whatever you want to call it. It's basically an 8-week program or 10-week program where you spend time meeting tons and tons of other entrepreneurs who are looking to start companies, linking up, starting companies, not starting companies, doing hackathons, learning, attending lectures, doing all this stuff. They really want to be kind of like the MBA of the future. And they have basically all of the criteria for an MBA program, probably minus the campus and the business curriculum, but everything else is probably better than most MBA programs. And in fact, a lot of people from On Deck are duly enrolled in top MBA programs. So we're doing On Deck. It's an online community right now. And then a bunch of us who had only met online were saying, hey, why don't we just meet up in person? Nothing's going on. It's locked down. It'd be fun to just get together and co-work for a month. And so we converged on Tulum. My friend Michael pulled it all together, and we landed here. And kind of like a week before, it basically didn't have any. There were no expectations. There's nothing planned beyond just kind of let's get together and co-work. And slowly, we got a little cheeky and put up some like a landing page, social media accounts, and it turned into a thing, right? It went from being a co-working thing to we had just talked to TechCrunch yesterday, and Natasha, she was saying that this is the most interesting, like a very interesting take on the whole co-working, co-living hacker house thing. And
right, you're calling it Launch House, is that right?
Yeah, it's called Launch House, launchhouse.co. Basically what it's evolved into is, and it's all set against this backdrop of where the technology industry is going. The technology industry is slowly moving into the hands of the influencers, right? Particularly in consumer, particularly in venture capital, right? You're seeing VCs on Twitter focusing much more on personal brand, much more on starting podcasts and newsletters and growing email lists and growing Twitter followers and all this stuff. There's intense competition. That's why. When there's more competition in brand and less differentiation with products, brand matters a lot. So influencers are basically taking over traditional investor roles. Same thing is going to be happening with consumer technology, right? So you need a platform to actually get users. Particularly with these creator economy startups, really, really important that influencers are involved. And so I think Balaji has tweeted about this a bunch, but the idea is that the future belongs to these influencers. So how are influencers made? How do influencers work? In entertainment world, they have these things called TikTok houses, Hype House, Sway House. These are basically places that people go. They're like modern reality shows. If social media is the modern television, TikTok houses are the modern reality shows, right? Mm-hmm. And so they have these houses which are meant to basically create connections, collaborations, and expand the brands and the followings of all the people in the houses. So as a joke, we said Launch House is a TikTok house for tech people. Well, turns out it actually is very useful. It's actually not a bad idea. And so, and it's not a bad idea for a number of other reasons. I think one of the truths is there's this concept of the invisible college, the invisible college.
It's a long-standing concept. There have been a few different instantiations of it, and like there's one in the UK. There's one. My friend Michael Toomim in the Bay Area does one. So which one are you referring to?
I think I'm just referring to the general concept of this idea of a place where intellectuals gather, right? So intellectuals and people just always needed these places to gather. Like there's a saying that like Stalin, Hitler, and Trotsky and all these people gathered in Vienna, and that's where they all met. And a lot of people are saying right now, okay, online, this is the place where it's going to be. And I really think Twitter is that right now. But having been at Launch House for the last couple weeks, man, like in person, unstructured interactions is something that cannot be compared to anything. And I think when you put hyper creative, hyper productive people in an environment like this, who are, we're all trying to start things, we're all trying to build things, we're all trying to launch things, really, really magical stuff starts happening. So
that's awesome. It's really awesome. I mean, I've been talking a little bit about this kind of thing and blogging about this kind of thing. And I actually, not too long ago, I did a Zoom call with a bunch of people that were interested in this type of thing. But it's still just kind of, at least on my end, I'm still just kind of thinking about what is the right model. So it sounds like from you guys, because I talked with a few of the people in your gang actually, and my understanding is that so far the Launch House is a relatively just a decentralized informal experiment, right? Like you pretty much all rented a place and you're like sharing the rent. It's not like a LLC or like a business model yet. It's just a kind of early experiment of basically people sharing a house for now, right?
So for now, but I mean, sharing a house and we have a website and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Launch House 2 is starting in like October 22nd, 23rd. Okay. And this is, we're going to be running the actual experiment for something more.
Okay.
Specifically around this concept around this social media reality show.
Cool. So could you give us a sneak peek at like what is the longer term model? Like what is your vision there? How could you would you mind, like, or is it like top secret? I don't want to pry.
I can share some ideas. We're very early on with this whole event, and
understood, of course,
exploring it as we go. But basically, if you look at Y Combinator, Y Combinator is now a certified B2B SaaS incubator, more than anything else. And you can tell that because we are seeing this amazing renaissance in consumer tech products right now, right? Specifically with this paid content creator economy stuff, tons of amazing innovation in this space. Not a drop in the bucket for Y Combinator. In their last class, there was not a single consumer tech, or like there were one or two. So why is that? Y Combinator want to kind of guarantee growth. They want to guarantee their success. So they rely on their network. What is their network? Their network is a bunch of companies. What do companies need? SaaS, right? And so they can sell to themselves, right? Like it makes a ton of sense. If I were YC, I'd be focused on B2B as well. Cool. So what do we do about the consumer products? People are still going to need consumer products. People are still going to need consumer software. Where does what's going to go on in this industry? And this is where the media comes in. This is where having a very, very strong media presence matters a lot. And so I think this is a very pie in the sky idea, but like the future Y Combinator for consumer needs to be a media company. And virtually even Andreessen Horowitz. Andreessen Horowitz was very early on to podcasting and newsletters. That was one of their many claims to fame as a differentiated venture firm. And so if you think about, okay, if we were to rebuild Y Combinator or Andreessen Horowitz today, what would that look like? Well, investing in media, right? Okay, what are media formats that are really important today? TikTok, right? Instagram. These are the platforms that we're focused on. Even crazy things like Netflix, Hulu, who knows, right? What would happen if a reality show made by a bunch of tech people wound up on one of these platforms? That would be cool. Hypothetically, if you build enough of a following, you become in an advantageous position to invest. And so that is particularly true when the entire value prop, the entire focus and mission of the company is launching things, right? Right. We're Launch House, and we've launched 9 products so far. And the entire energy of the house is, what are you launching next? What are you working on? What are you building? What are you launching? What's your business model? What's your strategy? We hold these pool storms every couple of days where like we'll all get in this comically small pool and brainstorm kind of like, business models and user experience for different people's projects. So it's really a different like beast than kind of a traditional hacker house or even like a investment firm. Mm-hmm. For Launch House 2, it's really going to be, a network of houses with programming and sponsors and a reality show, but we'll see what happens beyond that.
Okay, interesting. So sponsor model, so that'll be part of the income is sponsors. Have you decided where it's going to be yet?
Yeah, we'll be back in Tulum.
Oh, in Tulum. Cool. So why Tulum? What's so good about Tulum, or why is Tulum a great spot for this kind of thing?
Tulum is amazing for a number of reasons. I would say, obviously the beaches, obviously the community, obviously the music, obviously everything down here. It's one of the few places Americans can go outside the country right now. It is also pretty safe from a COVID perspective. There are a lot of tourists coming through, but it's a small town. And I think the last place you want to be in is large cities right now. And so when we have strict COVID guidelines, it's really important for us to be careful. It's also very cheap. So we can have a very, very high quality experience. Like we're staying in a full-blown mansion with, 3 pools and maids and everything for like, less than the cost of San Francisco rent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Cool. Very cool. Well, do you have any parting words? Is there anything that I can do to help you folks, or anything you wanted to ask me?
I guess my ask for the audience and ask for everybody is, if you're at all interested in social science and technology, feel free to subscribe to my newsletter. And then if you're interested in joining the next Launch House or the one after that, we're particularly looking for people who are, founder hacker types who have big personalities, in air quotes. So if you're interested in that, definitely head over to launchhouse.co/LH2. And I'm really excited about what you're working on. As you know, I think it's only a matter of time before the world's brightest minds in academia and elsewhere kind of start monetizing their brilliant brains. And I'm honestly really excited to see what that does for science and what that does for the world, because the business model has been broken for a long time, and I'm glad people like you are showing everybody the light.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm trying to find the light and show it at the same time. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, people listening, and like Brett said, you can sign up to his newsletter. It's totally free, and it's good stuff, high quality social science teachings that are really interesting for founders and creators alike. That's socialstudies.news. There's a link in the show notes, so people can check that out easily. And Brett, I just wanted to thank you for coming on again. This was cool. Really interesting to look under the hood a little bit more of the various projects that you're working on. You and I have talked a bit before, but I got to learn much more about, how you see things and what exactly how you're running your own personal kind of intellectual content operations. And it's also really cool to hear the updates on deck and Launch House. Sounds super exciting. I'm super interested in that stuff too. I completely agree with you folks that it's a really promising and exciting next step for where basically like tech and media are going. So I can't wait to see what you folks do with it all. And thanks for coming on to share all of this. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
All right, I'll be in touch with you, man. Take it easy.
All right, later.
All right, everybody. Thanks for coming out. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like it, reply, all that good jazz. And I hope you found that interesting. I'm back on the horse with the podcast. We've got a lot of recordings now and a lot more coming up. So if you didn't get to hear all of this, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, so you can listen to it on your phone and, in more convenient ways later. So I just go to the Other Life podcast. You can find it wherever. There's also a link in the show notes. And if you're working on your own independent intellectual projects and you need your own kind of serious, committed community of other people really trying to buckle down and accelerate their progress on their writing projects or their blogs or books or YouTube channels or podcasts or whatever, you might want to check out indiethinkers.org. You can request an invitation, and then I'll get back to you, and you can learn more about that way if you want to. It's still in development, but I'm pretty excited by it. We got more and more people in there, pretty steady growth each month. And I think I'm pretty pumped on it. I'll tell you more about it probably sometime in the next few months. I've been just working on it a lot, but now it's at a point where I think it's really pretty solid and it's really helping a lot of people. So soon I'm going to do more work to really kind of communicate what I'm doing with it all and what's going on within Indie Thinkers, because it's been a bit, a bit not like secret or anything. I've been mentioning it in public, but I haven't really been promoting it or really trying very hard to show what we're doing, because I've just been building it. So expect that sooner than later. But yeah, you can request an invite at any time. There's a link to that in the show notes also. That's kind of my main focus at the moment. All right, gang. Thanks for coming out. As always, hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time. Later.